America and the world during the Depression prior to us really getting involved in war. Now, I do want to kind of go through some stuff here, and we'll get into this, all right? The first thing is, in between the wars, in about 1939, FDR commissions a man named Gerald Nye, he's right here in the middle, to get a committee of people together. There are 4 other people, and they're called the Nye Committee. And the Nye Committee studied who made money during the war. We could potentially see these things coming with what Japan and Germany and Italy were doing, and he wanted to study out who made money. And the Nye Committee comes back with a kind of duh moment. They said the only industries that made money were the weapons industries, the tanks and the guns. So in essence, what the United States kind of starts doing here is they start maybe early on picking a side, and we're going to start Browning and other organizations and start kind of producing weapons that England will later on need, and we'll get into that with some other things. Now, Congress, seeing this happen, quickly moves. We are isolated at this time, and they will actually pass a series. There were 4 of them. Later on, we're going to review them, so I'll save it for that. But they were called the Neutrality Policy or the Neutrality Acts. As I said, there were 4 of them, 35, 36, 37, and 39. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to prevent an all-out, they're trying to prevent FDR from giving help to any belligerent, to any person that was fighting in the war. And because FDR had forged a great friendship with England, and if you can actually see back here, it says, aid to Britain is total war. So really and truly, Neutrality Acts were mainly aimed at, hey, FDR, don't sell stuff to England that's going to get us caught up. We tried to help England out before in World War I with the Lusitania. Look what happened. And so they're warning. Now, FDR, seeing this and understanding, will go and give a very telling speech, which is called the Quarantine Speech. The Quarantine Speech, in essence, basically said, there are all these totalitarian governments coming up, and they're restricting freedoms and democracy, and we must do everything within our power to quarantine them where they are and stop them from expanding. He's talking about the Japanese, the Italians, and of course the Germans. Now, communism was kind of a second thought there. Really, he's focused on those. So that actually tells us that FDR had some maybe intel on different things. Now, one thing I did kind of leave off here, and I want you to put this down here, and this is interesting, what's going on here. The Olympics are held, hang on one second. The Olympics are held in 1936, FDR's second term, in, come on, where are they at? They're in Germany. Hitler actually sees this as a great opportunity to prove how good the Aryans are. But actually a United States person really messes that up. His name is Jesse Owens, and what do you notice about him? He's African American, correct? Jesse Owens kind of blows away the competition, and it's actually well documented and kind of critical. He kind of shows us that the Aryan race were not superior. And so this sends Hitler back to the drawing board, and he's going to kind of go. Now, Owens is famous because the people of the Nazi committee would not hand him his medals because they saw him as being inferior and actually left him at his feet, and he refused to pick him up. Somebody from the American delegation later picked him up. But that's an interesting story nonetheless, right? I think it is. Now, another person who tries to get us involved in understanding how bad Hitler was, because understand me, in 1936, 37, a writer of The Lost Generation, Gertrude Stein, actually recommended Adolf Hitler to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. FDR is maybe on friendly terms in 36 with him. Henry Ford and Charles Lindbergh go and visit quite frequently over there. So there's some things that are going back and forth. But this actor actually wants to make us understand what we're being told about Adolf Hitler is not the truth. His name is Charlie Chaplin. He was a silent actor as a kid. And he produced, starred, wrote, directed a picture called the great dictator. Who's he supposed to be there? Well, of course, he's supposed to be Adolf Hitler, correct? Now, he can't use Adolf Hitler because that's wrong, and can't use. So he names himself Adenoid Heinkel. Okay, but the idea is, and I'll show you some clips in class, was to get America aware of what Adolf Hitler truly was doing and what we were being told he was doing and how untrue that was. Now, we're moving into 1940 at this point, and the question came up, should FDR run again? FDR is doing so well, and he doesn't really see anybody who can kind of take his mantle. But as you see here, a lot of people said, don't have a third term. There actually existed a two-term tradition. The two-term tradition basically meant, out of respect to George Washington, who served 2 terms, a president should only nominate himself on a ballot for 2 consecutive terms. Now, there has been a few exceptions, whereas Ulysses Grant did run, didn't win, and Teddy Roosevelt had 2 really, and then kind of tried to come back for a 3rd term. So the two-term tradition is referring to that. Now, as you can see here, we have a lot of bets on different people. Wendell Willkie was the guy who's going on there. Rotten eggs with Roosevelt, omelets with Willkie. And then as we get into this, you see a lot of mentions about a 3rd term. 3rd International, 3rd Reich, 3rd term. The Constitutionalist, no 3rd term, no 3rd term. Financial debauchery, run riot. Here's your hat, Frank. Where's your hurry? No Franklin the First. No man is good 3 times. And so the idea is he did this. Now, why am I showing you this? Because in 1940, FDR runs and wins a 3rd term. He's the only president to serve more than 2 terms. So much so that after he passes away, the 22nd Amendment is passed. And the 22nd Amendment, you have 2 twos, right? 2 terms. You can only be elected to 2 terms, and that's it. So there it is, and it tells you no man or woman may serve more than 10 years in the White House. And so that's the general mentality. The 22nd Amendment prevents somebody like FDR from running for and winning more than 2 terms. Now, the last thing I want to show is a famous person who recently had another book come out called Which Pet Should I Pick? Something like that. And it's Dr. Seuss. Now, I've made mention to Dr. Seuss many times in here. He had the Sneetches talking about the African Americans, the stars upon thars, African Americans with Americans. He also had the Great Butter Battle, which referred to which side of the butter toast, which side of the toast you put your butter on, and that's talking about communism. But he got his start in World War II making political cartoons about just about everybody. Here, he's making one about this Hitler bird that's going and chopping down the country trees. And he says, ho hum, when he's finished pecking down there that last tree, he'll quite likely be tired. The Americans sat up in our isolated tree. We said we're in a different part of the country, and there's no way Hitler's going to come after us. And to an extent, maybe we were right there. Hitler did have a plan to come over, but it wasn't until 46. But make no mistake about it, he does do some things there. And we're going to look at a lot more Dr. Seuss cartoons as we go through World War II. And I'm going to show you some clips of Charlie Chaplin because it's funny. It's good stuff. Now, we've talked about America and the world during the Depression. The next thing is actually the breakout of war in 1939 and what America does. Understand, we know that gun makes money. We're going to try to stick neutral. Even though Chaplin and Dr. Seuss are using the media to influence us, we have a 3rd-term president, kind of breaking the rules, if you will. And it gets much more interesting in World War II. Okay?